Intro music.
Intro music. More intro music. All right. So welcome to Muay Thai Bones, episode 3. For you guys joining us for the first time, this is Sylvie, 200 fight plus fighter, Muay Thai fighter Sylvie, right?
Yes.
And her
husband
Kevin, who is the kind of behind the scenes guy.
Partner in crime.
Yeah. And we are driving back from Chiang Mai, where we go twice a month, 10-hour drive from Pattaya to Chiang Mai, because the best female fighting in the world is in Chiang Mai. And we've started the Muay Thai Bones podcast to basically chat on the way home from Chiang Mai and cover some of the more interesting, important things about Muay Thai, right?
Yeah, because we have these conversations anyway. And so we thought it'd be interesting to film it.
And share them with everybody.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, thank you everyone on Patreon who supports this kind of content. It's free for everybody on YouTube, but our patrons are the ones that help us get to these places and also do have kind of upgrades, technical upgrades. We went and got some nice little radio mics so that I don't know, the car noise is a little bit down. Last time we had some metal rings that were shaking on the camera. Yeah.
What is that sound?
And these mics will also be an awesome improvement for when you interview legends of Muay Thai and female fighters to get really nice, crisp audio. Hopefully it's crisp right now.
Yeah.
We're about, 2 hours out of Chiang Mai now? We have 8 more to go.
We're
something like that.
2 hours outside.
Oh, did you do more than 2?
Yeah, we're about 6 hours from home.
We kind of take turns in 4-hour chunks usually. Chonk. That was from Big Mouth. Sylvie doesn't even remember that. We have a reference to it.
One time, and then Kevin uses it as a quote. It's like someone quotes a movie, some throwaway, obscure line.
Totally, and it was so awesome in that. And you missed the whole thing. I feel like we should rewatch Big Mouth just so we can get that.
We can rewatch Big Mouth.
Chonk. Okay. Hey, we probably should rewatch Big Mouth. Okay, so the way this Muay Thai Bones works is we take really diverse topics. So whatever we're talking about next, if you're not interested, skip 15 minutes and there's going to be something totally different.
Yes.
And I'm kind of excited about how broad our conversation can get.
Kevin gets excited.
One of the great things about these mics is I get very excited and I talk very loud. And Sylvie's pretty measured in her tone.
So we put a muffler on Kevin.
Yeah, we
amped me up a bit so that my mouse voice comes
we can turn down Kevin's mic and keep Sylvie's mic nice and robust and powerful.
But as a warning, we have not calibrated it to my cackle, so that might
Your cackle, okay, that's true. Your cackle has certain powers. Okay, so we're gonna start with I'm checking down on the time. We're going to start with a really big topic. A topic that comes up all the time. And it's the kind of topic that when we see people discussing it online, we don't want to go anywhere near it. We're like, that Facebook thread, no way. And part of the reason why is that almost everybody who's commenting on this type of stuff has already got their mind made up.
And they're very emotionally invested in the way they already feel.
Yeah, so and I would say on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, I think so.
Right? And so it's a controversial topic, and the reason why we're talking about it really is, yes, it comes up, but it's also related to a few other things we want to talk about. And it would be good to just give our perspective, because our perspective, we've had some experiences that not everybody has.
Yes.
And then you can fold it into your already pre-existing idea on this. So the topic is child fighting in Thailand, right?
Fun.
which got, it becomes germane in a topic of conversation in waves, and the most recent wave was the tragic death of a young kid who was fighting a lot, maybe under pretty unadverse circumstances. I think he was 13 years old,
13, yeah.
and it came right in coincidence with a move in Thailand to legally ban child fighting, to change the law under the age of 12. And so there was a kind of resurgence in trying to get control over child fighting. So we don't want to really discuss the proposed ban or whatever. It's better to just talk about the topic in general. That in the West, because we don't really have child fighting, we don't have kids fighting without gear or anything like that, we sometimes can lack perspective on what the realities are in Thailand. And we ourselves, even though we've been here almost 7 years, can only speak to what we've seen.
Yes.
Like children that have been trained in your gyms, child fights that we've seen. Like there might be many circumstances that are well beyond what we've seen that are worth talking about, but we're not authorities in that way. We can only speak from what we've seen.
Yes.
So we were thinking, you were telling me before we started a story about our own gym that really is a nice entry point into this child fighting topic, I thought. So maybe fill people in on what you were telling me.
So I was on the way back to Pattaya with my gym after 2 of our fighters had fought at Rajadamnern. So Alex is not Thai, he's Italian, but he's been raised in the gym since he was about to turn 13, maybe like early 12 or something.
Hey, he came just a little actually before us.
Yeah, so he's been raised at the gym since quite young. He's 17 now. And then he fought at Rajadamnern, and then another fighter, who's a Thai fighter, Gangat, I think he's about 15 or 16. He had also just fought on the same card, and he was there with his mom.
He's Thai.
He's Thai. And Pinu was like handing out the money at this table where we had stopped to eat. And it's just this kind of exchange of like, pay out your corner, pay P-Guy for having helped, blah, 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 all this stuff. And there was a discussion between Pinu and Gangat, the Thai kid's mom, because Pinu noticed that Gangat had immediately handed the money to his mom. And she said, he always gives me all the money. I try to give him $300 or $400, so he has spending money as like, you fought, have some money, and he refuses to take any of it ever. And she said that his cousin, who was sitting next to him, who was raised kind of like his brother, does the same thing. And Pinu was remarking what a good boy Gangat is for having this quality of taking care of his mom. Some notable things here are that Alex and Gangat are not the same economic class as each other. Alex is also not Thai, Gangat is Thai. There's a lot going on here. Alex surely gives some of his money, if not a lot of his money, to his own father, who often is living in Thailand, but I don't think that he has the, I'm guessing, pride or honor of taking care of his dad that Gangat does, taking care of his mom, or that Carabao does, taking care of what is technically his aunt, but who's raising him as her son. There is a huge element in Thailand, in the culture since before fighting, that involves children being indebted to their parents for all of the effort they put into raising them. And so as you get older, you will have a lot of children turning into adults having responsibilities towards their parents. They send money home to take care of their parents. They move home to take care of their parents. Pinu lives in his parents' house to take care of them. It's a culturally huge thing that I don't think in the West, where we tuck our parents in homes, that we identify with anymore. Although I think that maybe 100 years ago we did.
Yeah, maybe even 50 years ago, it was not uncommon to have many generations under one house.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess what we're really pointing to is that part of the difficulty of Westerners trying to understand the child fighting, getting paid as a professional, very small amounts of money, but that we in the West tend to think of it as a labor issue, like child labor issue. Yeah. That it's our modern conception that every person is a kind of autonomous laborer in the market, and it's just not right for children to be in the marketplace of labor, and also for parents to be kind of extracting labor from children.
Yeah, we think of like Gary Coleman or something, like
Right.
child actors whose parents take all their money, and it's terrible.
Yeah, but part of what I think is interesting about the child fighting discussion is that a lot of Muay Thai really grows out of agrarian economies and agrarian family structures that ultimately have a sense of honor and respect to the family
Duty.
and duty, that all the children are part of the production of the family. That if you're on the farm, if you're in the rice field, whatever, you are working as part of being a family. It's not like you're in the labor market.
Right.
So I think that for a large part, child fighting really is part of the larger concept of being within the family and working within the family, right?
Yeah.
And you're not an autonomous unit. It's not a modern conception.
Right. And in that same house is the Western, this is very new, but because none of us are that old, we think it's been like this forever. The very new conception of a childhood as being this, like, you're always not doing anything, you don't have any cares, you just go to school.
Such a huge topic. It's such a huge
and
topic.
in many parts of the world, the way we think of childhood and how it should be don't exist. In America, it doesn't exist for many of the children who are growing up in difficult, adverse circumstances.
But it goes beyond, it really goes beyond childhood because of the affluence of the West.
Yeah.
A large measure of the goal of one's life is to extend your childhood as far as possible. Like
we do that really well.
6 years old, 8 years old, 20 years old, the perpetual student, the 30-year-old who's buying video games and becoming a powerful consumer of entertainment, that eventually to become affluent enough that you basically live a childhood throughout your life.
Yes.
And this product of seeing childhood innocence and play as a kind of continuous project of the individual is very far from the childhoods of the world.
Yes. Yeah, there are a lot of detailed nuances of that within the differences in culture. I come up against it a lot, actually.
Okay.
Just the other day, again, went into a coffee shop that's owned by the parents of one of the kids at our gym, because I was interviewing Crenu, and the two kids who are fighters at our gym were working at the cafe, and I had this immediately, like, why are they not in school? And I had to, like, reason with myself. I'm like, is it a holiday? Like, all these things, they should be in school. Is that as an American, I have this belief that actually goes beyond my actual experience in life, that there is this possibility for upward mobility, that education will get you somewhere other than working in your mom's coffee shop when you're 25 anyway. Like, you generally, in Thailand, there is not a lot of upward mobility. You generally stay in the class that you're born to. You generally work in the business that your family does. Like, all these things. My personal experience is not that education gets you to a place that in the West we teach people education gets you to.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
so I'm saying there's a difference in culture where my, like, why is this happening? These kids should be in school. And then the reality of what that actually means, like, if they spent the day in school or not, what does that literally mean for the context of their life?
I also think, we're moving in a pretty wide arc here, because the biggest issue of child fighting is this can damage them physically, perhaps impair them for the rest of their lives. They have no consent. They're being kind of like circus performers almost that people are taking advantage of. These are the pictures of it. But I kind of want to, from my perspective, I think people are drawn to Thailand or cultures that maintain traditional filial bonds, that we're drawn to them because much of the meaning that is there that we've lost in our culture.
Yeah, we romanticize it a bit.
Yes, but we're drawn to it because it's missing. It's almost like if you're not getting something in your diet, you have to look somewhere to get it, right? And I think the way that you're talking about these bonds between a child and their parent and the set of honor and debt that's involved in working and giving your money to your family is the very thing that is missing in the West. And our families are just broken up individuals, and as soon as the parent gets too burdensome, you put them in a home somewhere. Like everybody's becoming quite disparate. And so I guess my larger point is why we're drawn to Thai culture is a lot of it is it's better than ours. And this is a component, like there's some important things going on in the culture that are missing from ours. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that there are kind of moral elements that people attach themselves to or are drawn to.
Okay.
But
do you know where I'm going, or did I go too far on the side?
I think you went too far, but I don't disagree with you.
Okay, well let me take it this way. So I'm going to bring this back to Muay Thai, which is what the podcast is about. The reason why everybody loves Muay Thai, and we know everybody loves Muay Thai, is because the Thais fight like nobody on the planet.
Yeah.
Like nobody on the planet. The average run-of-the-mill Muay Thai fighter has a fluency in fighting that very good Western fighters do not have.
Yeah.
At all. The reason why they fight like that is because they have been fighting since they're kids.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that at all? Like we watch the kids, the boys, come up in the gym. We watch how they learn. We watch how they are exposed gradually to
Gradual
conflict.
is a big point here, because when we see little kids fighting, they're so good. Like they fight. Like you can see that they've been training and all these. Like when you see the little kid fights on YouTube or whatever, they're really good.
Okay.
Right? They're not like windmilling at each other usually. My point being, they look very skilled. They look very trained. They look like they've been very.
They don't seem trained. They seem beyond trained. They seem natural.
Well, let me get to my point.
Okay, good.
Which is that in my actual experience of children at the gym, they do not train the same way that an adult professional fighter trains. They are still children. Like, they're still given the lesser version of something. It's short. They're given, like, a round on pads, and then they have to go march back and forth all the time. They spar with each other, but not every day. Like, all of these things. It's a kid's version of professional fighter. Like, these kids are not, like, being trained the way that a top-ranked lumpity.
The truth is we don't even know how most kids are being trained.
That's why I said my experience of children in the gyms that I've been in is like this. So the like intensity that we assume.
People are not worried about their training. They're worried about their fighting. They're worried about padless head punching and elbows and kicks to the head. They're worried about damage. They're not worried that they're doing too many push-ups, right?
No, I think people worry about the training. They're like, their bodies are not done growing yet, blah, blah, blah. They should not be training so hard.
I guess I have a different perception of you. To me, the emotional issue is the actual...
The pearl clutching part is the fighting.
Yeah.
That's the part people get emotionally upset about.
Yeah.
Morally upset about.
So, okay.
Anyway.
But no, I am having a hard time getting to a really important, meaningful point that I always return to, and it's not the fault of our conversation. I'm having a hard time getting to it. This is an image that I have in my mind that I return to all the time. How much time we got there?
6 minutes.
6 minutes. This is something I think about all the time. Thailand, the analogy is, what happens if there was a seafaring culture that had the greatest sailors in the world? Like, just unbelievable sailors. Not only were their technical skills on the boat far beyond anyone else, they also had insane balance, awareness of the sea, knowledge of the sea, just all the things that make you one with the sea as a sailor. And that there were no other seafaring peoples that sailed like these people. That, to me, describes Thailand's Muay Thai. The reason why these sailors were so incredible is that they are put on the boat early, like very, very young. They're also put on the boat under very harsh conditions sometimes. And sometimes they are injured.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a perfectly safe environment. This process is what makes the sailors what they are. Now, I would just say that anybody who is really drawn to this aspect of Muay Thai, but is against child fighting, and would take actions and support ending child fighting, what you're really talking about is killing off the incredible art of Muay Thai as it is known. It would become something else. Do you agree with that?
100%.
And so I'm like, I can understand who someone doesn't give a damn about Muay Thai might be like, this should not be happening. But my feeling is that if you're drawn to what is really unique about Muay Thai, the fact that Thais learn and fight at a very young age is really the reason why they fight like nobody in the world. Like Sanchai would never have been Sanchai learning when he was 15 years old with pads on, fighting 10 times.
Yeah.
Like, it never would have been. They digest the art form, and as you told me the other day, they learn the techniques and the spacing before fear.
Yeah.
Before fear comes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're continuing on with that topic. Sylvie wants to talk about head trauma.
I actually don't want to talk about head trauma, but I was wondering if that was where we were headed.
That is where we're heading, but we're going to take a circuitous route. We're going to talk about that later on the podcast, because this is also something that people ask Sylvie about as an adult as well. One of the things, though, that I find interesting about the child fighting discussion is that it molds itself into a larger concept of how much Muay Thai should become westernized. There is a certain sense in Thailand that Muay Thai is in a crisis.
Yeah.
The demographic of Muay Thai, of people who love Muay Thai, is aging out, and socioeconomically, they're lower class people, rural people, right, working class. And there is a sense that Muay Thai is losing out to football, soccer, or other forms of entertainment. And there is this way that there is a good argument that much of what is saving Muay Thai or reinvigorating it is actually the interest of the West.
Yes.
And before there was the interest of the West, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, it was Japan that actually, the interest in Japan actually helped stimulate Muay Thai in a certain regard. So, but Western interest means that Westerners are going to invariably impose their view on what's good or bad about Muay Thai. Right. So there's pressures happening on Muay Thai now from the West. The rule changes, which we'll talk about in a future podcast, moving towards 3-round, scoring differently, having promotions where Westerners have, by rules, have a greater chance of winning. There's a lot of things happening where Muay Thai is fighting for its survival, and part of its survival involves the enthusiasm of the West. We'd agree with that, right?
And Western judgments about like what's civilized. It's
Yes.
very colonial.
And well, this is the kind of interesting thing. This is what the one part I did not want to leave off on this child fighting discussion, is that there's a history in Thailand. There's a great pride in Thailand that Thailand was never colonized. That all the other countries around were colonized, but never invaded. This is broadly speaking, and never colonized by the West. There is a line of criticism, of historical criticism, which is that the reason why Thailand was never colonized is that it's self-colonized.
Yeah.
That under the British and French,
self-westernized.
well, yeah, that they called it civilization. That Thailand tried to distinguish itself from its neighbors as being more civilized, not full of savages, because the moral leverage point of colonialization was we have to come in and bring our civilization to these people for their own good.
And the king was like, we'll do it.
So,
You don't have to force this.
well, the king was quite celebrated for how he modernized Thailand. Siam. And also there was also a modernization process with Muay Thai as well, like putting on gloves. But this act of self-civilization or self-westernization is an impulse that is woven into the fascination of the West with Thailand.
Yep.
This is what's kind of interesting to me, is that there is a degree of Thailand's own desire to eliminate... Oh, which way am I going?
You're going straight because we like that road better.
I go straight? Thailand's own desire to modernize and remove children from fighting seems to flow very much in this same kind of vein of like moving away from the like, we're not savages. The West feels like it's savage that children fight. We don't want to be, we want to be part of the international community, right? And so there's this sense that I think there's a sense in Thailand that many of the people who feel that Thais that feel that child fighting should end actually has a kind of broad upper middle class to upper class Bangkok centered sense of we can't really let those lower class people, those lower class kids be fighting. You'd agree with that?
Like drags us down kind of thing.
It kind of like it drags us down in the eyes of the world.
Right.
Right?
But on the similar, if not same token,
right,
Thailand does need to modernize in terms of like gender equality in order to enter into international...
Well, that's the same impulse.
Yeah,
that's the same impulse. The idea that women might one day be able to fight at Lumpini, if they do, it will be because they want to join the international community, a sense of equality.
Right.
So what's really interesting is we're kind of like on two sides of the same kind of issue.
Yeah.
We kind of feel like children should still be fighting with more care and safeguards, right? Protections. We don't want the worst case scenarios happening. There should be safety, but we would like to see Thailand modernize towards less traditional treatments of gender.
Yes.
So, one reason why this is really interesting is when we interviewed Stephen Fox of the IFMA, when you interviewed him, I threw a few questions in.
You have to say who Stephen Fox is.
Okay, jump in.
Stephen Fox, if you don't know, is the head of the IFMA. Some people may have seen him on Contender, which was like the ultimate fighter for Muay Thai many years ago. John Wayne Parr and Yotsun Kai.
That was maybe 10 years ago.
But he's this incredible figure. You can just ask him a question and just let him go. He's brilliant.
I'll tell you this. When we first interviewed him, when you interviewed him like 3-4 years ago, we were not sold on the IFMA at all. Like, we felt like a little too westernizing, threatening to authentic Muay Thai and everything. He won us over by speaking to us. And it's not just his charm. His arguments are seriously well thought out. And he's been fighting for Muay Thai to be to be an Olympic sport for probably more than 20 years.
Yes.
And seriously fighting. Like, it was a laughable idea that it could be a Olympic sport 15 years ago. It's not laughable anymore.
One of the more interesting things about our conversations with him that we've had several times now is that the road to inclusion in the Olympics is really creating tons of amazing things around the world with Muay Thai. So It's not like, will he get Muay Thai in the Olympics or not? All of these other things that are required for getting Muay Thai in the Olympics. Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because I know that that's his theme, and I know you're big on that. But I'm like, Steve Fox is like, he says that, but he wants it in the Olympics. He is like beelined on that. I'm not disagreeing. I laugh because Steven is a very clever man. He is also building the story of success if he might fail. Like, if he doesn't get the Olympics, it's all this other stuff that succeeded.
Okay,
but
sure.
You asked me why I'm laughing.
To our point,
yeah.
One of the side project but completely integral things in getting Muay Thai in the Olympics involves regulation of child fighting.
Well, this is what was interesting is that and I need to stop for a second. This interview will be up on YouTube probably in a couple weeks, so you can't watch it now, but it'll be on in a couple weeks. Subscribe,
and then you'll know what we're talking about.
And then you know fully what we're talking about. But I think people can follow us, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Just give reference.
One of the most powerful things he said, well, not powerful, emphatic things he said, I was shocked about how hard he drove on the anti-child fighting position. Right? Of everything he said, it was the most...
But he's not banning children fighting. He wants regulation for children fighting.
Okay.
He was talking about
what does that
paths
matter?
rather than, like, children can't fight at all. These are distinctions.
Okay, you feel like it's an important distinction?
To me, it's important.
Okay.
But your point is?
I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
Okay. You said one of the most amazing things he said in this interview was about the banning of children fighting.
Yes. The sense I had from him is that the push against children fighting is part of this internationalization of Muay Thai that is a broad cultural movement, really, that he's trying to pull Thailand as much as possible into an international standard of conduct, which involves equality of gender and the anti-children legal movement.
Yes.
Right? Anti-children fighting legal movement. We can't get into the complexity of this. Just so everybody knows, prostitution is illegal in Thailand. There's lots of prostitution.
Highly tolerated.
Highly tolerated. So even a legal banning would be incredibly complex as a reality. Like, I think there are even technically laws on the books now which kind of make child fighting not even legal.
They're there, but they're not largely enforced.
Yes. So passing a new one would not necessarily change what you think it would change. But this is kind of going down a side road here. The larger sense is that the move towards the Olympics involves a wholesale concept of bringing Thailand in line with international standards and morals, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Stop and start?
Did we just hit a dead end there?
No, but is there another part of speaking to Stefan that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, God, there's so many good things in that interview. Let me talk about this real quick. What do we have? How much time on this?
15 minutes.
Oh, that's good. Part of the question about whether Muay Thai will benefit from inclusion in the Olympics comes with this delicate balancing act that Muay Thai is performing in many other parts of itself. As said, Muay Thai is the demographic that has traditionally supported Muay Thai is aging out. And so it's reaching for new audience. It's trying to appeal to more high-so, upper middle class customers, right? In gyms in Bangkok.
Yep.
In its image, it used to be a very kind of like dirty sport. A lot of kids would, like if you were a middle class parent, you'd probably put your kid in a Taekwondo class because they have nice clean uniforms instead of put them into a seedy gym where nobody wears a t-shirt, no one wears a shirt, right?
Yep.
So as Muay Thai tries to like transform itself and also take advantage of the interest in from the West, inclusion of the Olympics would broaden the appeal and even the awareness of Muay Thai to just an unbelievable level, like something never imagined before. People, purists, people who love Muay Thai as it traditionally has been, are deathly afraid that this will radically alter what Muay Thai is.
Mm-hmm.
I know Stephen likes to talk as if IFMA scoring is just like Thailand Muay Thai. Is not close. In very important ways.
There are too many to go into.
Yeah, and it's not a criticism of IFMA scoring. It really is. IFMA scoring is kind of like a brilliant compromise between kickboxing of the world, right? Things that Westerners do well and recognize well, and traditional Muay Thai scoring. It's a compromise.
Yes.
And it's actually a beautiful compromise, I think. Like, it's not like glory or something. It's not kickboxing. It's Muay Thai, but Muay Thai pushed through a filter through which the world can kind of come and join and celebrate, right?
Yes.
I would say it's like that.
And there are often distinctions between amateur and professional sports.
Yeah, like, so amateur boxing is nothing, there's a lot of thought that it's nothing like professional boxing. It's just point fighting, right? And there's a role maybe for that difference. I personally feel that what Muay Thai can gain from Olympic inclusion, or even if they never get included, but there is a tremendous push, like a systemic push towards inclusion, it far outweighs its detriments. Yeah, would you agree with that? We didn't always feel this way, but we feel this way now.
I don't know. To me, having the Olympic version of something has incredible benefits. And I think that Olympic inclusion is specifically amazing for Thai women. And so I'm like way behind it for that purpose.
Okay.
But as long as, and of course this isn't possible, but as long as it does not
it's gonna do that. Whatever you're about to say, it's gonna do that.
Yeah, okay, so
Let's say it though.
as long as there is a version of traditional Muay Thai in Thailand happening, even if it becomes small, it still exists. Like, it's still happening somewhere. It's still this thing. But
you don't want it to be a museum piece.
No, and this is also a form of colonialism, which is looking at something and being like, no, stay traditional, like, stay old. You're not allowed to modernize. That's another form of, like, romantic colonialism.
You think so?
Yes.
I think it's post-colonial or something.
But there are lots of legends who we talk to who bitch and moan about how modern Muay Thai in Thailand is nothing like their Muay Thai, which was only 40 years ago, 30 years ago.
Well, when you say bitch and moan, that's not really how you feel about that.
Who criticize modern Muay Thai and don't watch it because it's so different.
Right.
I don't watch Max Muay Thai because it's so different, for example. I don't like watching it. So, but then there are people like Krunu whose life work is bringing these boys up to be stadium fighters, and so he's like, you have to adapt to how Muay Thai is now. Like, you have to win how it is now.
Yeah.
Because he's in the stadia. So I have to bring to terms my romantic ideals versus my, like, it's a living art, it's gonna change kind of thing.
Yeah, I just, I'm a little afraid that if Muay Thai keeps changing and changing, and most Thais won't even care as long as there's money flowing through, one day they'll look and then it'll be gone.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things we do with the Muay Thai Library Project is we really celebrate and try to archive these great fighters of the past. Many of these men are just largely forgotten by the art and sport they raised to such a high level.
Yeah.
Like, there's not socially high people. Some of them are, but much respected, but some of them are just champions just go on to side lives.
Yeah.
And Thailand would be very happy to let this continue.
This might be a side thing, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Say it, baby.
Stay in its side thing. Someone who we recently filmed with for the Muay Thai Library is Ajahn Surat, who is just this incredible figure. He is one of the most feared trainers in Thailand. He's very old school. He's the trainer of the Thai national team. He trained Karahat for a very short time. Karahat ran away from him
when he was a boy.
When he's like 14,
when he was a boy.
14,
Arjun Surat's older.
He's
over
in his
60s. Yeah.
But my point being that Ajahn Surat is like Krunu in that he is bringing forth all of these new fighters all the time. So he has to keep up with how Muay Thai is changing.
Right.
But he's also this capsule of time before because he's been so involved for so long. He worked with people for so long. And when he was talking about his very strong dislike for MX Muay Thai, which is a very modern version of let's change the rules, we'll put MMA gloves on, 3 rounds, try to hurt each other as much as possible.
Super aggression. Yeah, super aggression.
He sneered at it, and he's like, Muay Thai is a gentleman's sport. What they're doing to it is like an old boxing fan complaining about MMA. Is like, this is not our ethic. Like, this is not our aesthetic.
Yeah.
And I don't think that at the time that boxing was at its peak, it was considered like a super gentlemanly sport, whereas the older version was, and now we kind of see it as like, oh, those are like kind of
quaint,
gentlemanly. Yeah. And I think that Muay Thai kind of has that, where it's like we also remember boxing as like dirt poor people.
Yeah.
Like, you don't think of the boxers of like golden age of boxing, Western boxing, as coming from middle class or achieving a great deal of status or any of these things. It's low class.
Well, I guess there's a component of this which is just not, it's not just like back in my day, and then not wanting modernity. Like, modernity having, we see this all the time, like modernity is shied away from, and then it's the new normal and it's new excellence. There is just also, it seems, a quantitative loss of skill.
Yes.
It's like if the modern fighter, Thai fighter, was unbelievably skilled, but just in different ways, then you'd be like, oh, well, things are changing. You got to get used to it. You got to embrace. But there is also a feeling like something is being lost as you change the scoring aesthetic, as you simplify what's being done in the ring. You're losing the language. It's like if everybody talked Valley Girl talk suddenly. For sure. So I think there's that sense of like, you want to make sure that you don't accidentally kill off a tradition and a knowledge. Yeah. But linking this back to the IFMA and Olympic push, we have to be like clear about what's happening so that we can protect the parts that we don't want to lose.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that there are some wholesale cultural pressures being put on Thailand's Muay Thai gender equality, which we're on one side of that issue, child fighting, another side of that issue. And there is a sense, and I know that Stephen's doing this, he wants to de-emphasize the Thai-ness of Muay Thai. One of the biggest hurdles that Muay Thai had was that it's Thai. It's in the name.
Yeah, you can't have the name of a country in the name of a sport in the Olympics.
But it's not just a technical rule. It's an aesthetic problem. It's it belongs to the Thais. And one reason why you now see Muay Thai has one word and not two words is they wanted to de-emphasize the Thai-ness of it. So when you see Muay Thai one word, almost always, it's part of this kind of like erasure, a little bit of erasure that Muay Thai belongs to Thailand, which is difficult because Thailand has great pride in Muay Thai, but also wants to include other people in its participation and excitement for it. So the process towards the Olympics, while it could be really maybe life-saving to Muay Thai, also is going to exert an eroding pressure on the sport itself. And so if we can be like, yeah, that is what's going to happen, then we can take extra steps to preserve elements against, like, to restore or preserve elements that might be otherwise lost if we're not paying attention. So celebration of the older great fighters of Thailand, trying to preserve as much as possible traditional style scoring, which is narrative and structure, right? It's not just all evil gamblers, right? That the narrative, and we'll talk about this in another podcast, the narrative structure of Muay Thai scoring is one of its most beautiful characteristics. Strikes landed stat is another kind of fighting. And it would be very sad if Muay Thai one day was defined by strikes landed. Significant strikes landed. Okay.
Like, hey professor, what grade do I get on my thesis? How many words did you use?
How many big words did you use? Words over 9 letters. Right? Okay, I think that's good for that topic, right? But what's the next topic, do you think?
You wanted to delay. Yeah, you wanted to delay the brain injury one.
Oh, yeah. So no, well, let's go into that.
Okay.
So we're a little scattershot in our Stephen Fox summary. He had some incredible things to say. One of the most important things he said was that the chances of Muay Thai in the Olympics in Paris in 2024 were looking very dim. Karate had just been removed.
Breakdancing is in. The Olympics are moving towards much more urban, youthful, appealing to youth, smaller profile venues, right? And the direct the direct path into Muay Thai in the Olympics in 2024 is not looking good. He was pretty stark about that. He did say that there are still some possible avenues in. So it's not dead in the water, but it's something we don't hear a lot about, and it was really good to talk to him and to hear straight from him about so if it's not going to be 2024 in Paris, it's going to be 2028 in Los Angeles. Which would be really, if that's the case, growing USMT, get it?
US Muay Thai. Growing.
Get your shit together.
Well, they are getting their shit together. What they've done in the last, I would say, 2.5 to 3 years is mind-blowing. Very factional. Like, Muay Thai was very factional. It still is to some degree in the United States, but it has, through the iron will of I don't know who, Michael Corley probably, and maybe 3 or 4 other people exerting a pressure, it has really come together. And so the goal, maybe the deep goal, is 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. Wow, that'd be crazy. That would be crazy. So we want to go to head trauma, right?
My favorite topic.
Well, this is something that is very much in the news. People are becoming more aware of the fact that it's not one big giant concussion that gives you brain damage.
Cumulative,
repeated small blows. There's a lot of attention being turned to youth football, where there's repeated collisions over and over again. Basically, the sport is full body weight collisions that happen all day long. But there's growing sense of trepidation that brain damage is inherently part of boxing, Muay Thai. Sparring can be much worse than fights
because it's repeated,
because of the repetition.
Yep.
Hopefully, everybody is aware that headgear can actually produce worse problems.
Which is why it's shit that in Olympic boxing women have to wear headgear still and men don't.
Yeah, because they're women, because of female bones.
But it's less.
Female bones, Sylvie.
Let's make it more dangerous for women, because.
Yeah, and I was just reading the other day that people put on 16-ounce gloves for safety for sparring. They're worse.
Really?
Because it creates greater mass moving against a skull.
So you'll get clipped for sure, rather than like only if someone's accurate.
It's not only the size, it's just the mass on the hand. You're putting a heavier weight.
Yeah.
You're swinging a weight.
My fists don't weigh 16 ounces.
No, they don't.
Do now.
But if you put them... Exactly. So in terms of repetitive stress or trauma, everybody is like, put on the 16-ounce gloves.
So holding
it
a
actually
roll of
might
quarters
worse.
Doesn't actually reduce damage.
Yes,
That's crazy.
Roll of quarters. That's exactly what the physics is the same. The physics is the same, right?
Yeah.
It would actually be most safe to do bare-fisted sparring. Crazy, right? Okay, but you get this question all the time because it's been in the news, and for good reason. Football players retiring with lifetime problems. And everybody is like, Sylvie, are you worried about this? And very often the person asking you about this doesn't even really want to know what your answer is. They want to just say they're worried, right?
Yeah, or they want my answer to validate their worry in some way. But I'll let you guys in on a tip. If someone does something that is inherently risky in a regard, they don't spend a lot of time thinking about that thing. So if you are a extreme sport athlete who does base jumping, and you ask them, aren't you worried about smacking into cliffs? Yes, that is something that they consider and take precautions for, but it is not something they spend a lot of time thinking about, or they, like you asking the question, would not be base jumpers. If you're worried about it, would not do what that
in a
thing
weird
is.
way, the question isn't even answerable. Because to answer it in the way that somebody is asking it requires a framework of valuing risk and reward. I guess there could be a way of one could be asking the question in the sense that many people were not aware that there was a risk, that sparring over and over again could cause brain damage. People, Sylvie, don't look at me like I'm crazy.
The reason I'm looking at you like that is I'm wondering if you think that the people asking me this think that I don't have that information, that I don't know.
It could be. They themselves might have just read an article about, like for instance, I just told you 16-ounce gloves could cause greater repetitive trauma. And you're like, I didn't know that. Yeah. So if someone was like, Sylvie, do you worry about that? They could be in a way being like, are you even considering these additional factors that they are not even, I would say 3-4 years ago, there was not this awareness, this growing concern and awareness about repetitive trauma to the brain. So people asking this question might be relatively new to it. I've seen comments questions being posed. People new to Muay Thai, and they're even concerned about going to a gym and starting in Muay Thai because is this going to like expose me to a lifelong impairment?
Yeah, I guess there's like trends, like worry trends that come up. I think that in the early 2000s, the thing that runners were all getting was, aren't you worried about damaging your knees? And it was like, people have been running for so long, but at that time, the knee injury thing became like a trendy worry to have. It's how to protect your knees.
And there is a dimension of this because of the way that everything gets all virally shared, that does feel like this is a worry trend. But because the consequences are pretty dramatic.
Yes.
Like, it can change your quality of life.
Yes.
It's a worry trend, but it's also a significant thing to think about. And
for sure. And it's not, we're not not taking it seriously in this discussion here. I was concussed in my last fight against Loma because she threw me and I landed, my head smacked against the canvas. And that was the one injury of all my injuries that we took very seriously, and I rested hardcore for, I think, almost 2 years.
It's weird to characterize your career by that because you've had 235 fights, and that is the only concussion, other than one other very brief time that you were knocked to the ground. You almost have had no head trauma.
But that's my point, is that when I experienced actual head trauma, we took it very seriously. But as someone who's had 235 fights, I've not experienced a lot of head trauma other than this one time that we took very seriously.
I know. Okay. The reason why I'm laughing. Okay, that was a hell of a camera change.
Technical difficulties. Where's the towel?
Our battery ran out and we had to get another one in, and oh my god. Okay, so picking up where we left off on worries about concussion, one of the things that I guess I kind of wanted to make clear, because when people ask this question, I think what you left off on was all the damage. Like, aren't you afraid of all the damage? And I'm sure people also think of physical, like limb damage. But
well, there's an assumption that with 200 plus fights, there's a lot of damage.
A lot of damage. And you've had your share of injuries. Actually, we'll link a blog post you did detailing pretty much every single injury you've gone through
add a few things
in training. Need to update that. But you've had now 235 fights, and out of 235 fights, you've only been concussed 2 times that week, and there was any discernible concussion. One was about 6 years ago, maybe.
I don't remember being concussed after that fight.
You were
dropped.
unconscious for a second, and that probably is a sign of concussion. It was very minor. There were no concussion symptoms afterwards.
But
you were
I did
out for a second, and then you came to and you got up and won the fight. There's a gorgeous photo of that was taken by a photography student. That maybe we'll put a link to that too. It's so beautiful. That was maybe 6 years ago, and then when you fought Loma, you were thrown in I think the second round, and you landed on your head. And
my head like bounced on the canvas.
Often the head bounce is worse than an actual blow from a punch in terms of concussive force, and that was you had significant concussive symptoms after the fight, throughout the fight, like you were gone.
I don't remember that fight.
And you couldn't remember that forward. I think you fought a full another round, and then afterwards
I was like a broken record.
You were a broken record, yeah. But out of 230 people assume there's lots of head trauma. Out of 235 fights, 2 times did you experience it, and the one time was almost nothing. So So it's not like there's been a tremendous amount of in-fight head damage, brain damage. There's always that might be because one, it's not boxing. There's not a lot of head targeting also in Thailand. With hands, you got to watch out for head kicks. But there's something about Muay Thai in Thailand that seems much less prone to in-fight head damage, especially among female fighters, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there's not a lot of punchers.
Yeah, and you've not received a lot of blows to the head.
No.
And then the other question is, I guess would be in training. Trained really hard, many long hours now, almost 7 years. You didn't spar a lot in your first couple of years, but you're sparring much more now.
Yeah, and boxing sparring, which I don't think I did prior.
Yeah. So, given that, are you concerned at all about the repetitive injury type stuff that would occur through sparring?
Concerned is I do not worry myself with it. I do not strongly adjust my decisions based on it. Am I aware of it? Do I take any reasonable precautions to not facilitate those things happening? Yeah. But no, it's not something I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Working very hard on your guard.
It's more to do with cuts and nose breaks and things like that rather than concussion, but it definitely helps to be able to guard your head in general. But my impetus for improving my guard is more to do with cuts.
But we should also say you've had over 200 stitches in your face from cuts. The kinds of blows you get in Thailand that produce cuts are not really concussive blows. They're much more kind of like bone on bone, split the skin type events. So there has been a lot of like those kinds of injuries, but not thudding injuries. But this is one of the, you mentioned it earlier, we've been reading this book called The Rise of Superman, which is about flow state theory, which details the careers and risks of extreme athletes or adventurers sometimes. Wingsuit flying, almost everyone dies.
Yeah, anyone who's really good at it is dead.
Which is insane. But what that does is, in a strange way, is it puts the question of, aren't you concerned with or afraid of some kind of lasting injury that base jumpers know they might die.
Yes.
And it does nothing to slow the passionate in that sport, right? Repetitive brain injury is much of a smaller, death is the worst thing, right?
Yeah.
If you're jumping off cliffs. So is there for you this sense of this is just the cost of being committed to the art?
I think that anything that you commit yourself to that's even semi of an outlier is just this question of what are you willing to risk, or what are you willing to suffer for, or what are you willing to pay for in all these ways. Everything has a cost. Nothing is free.
Yeah.
Choosing to have children, choosing to get married, choosing to move somewhere, choosing a job. These are all small risks. There are risks involved in all of these things that may not be health, may not be whatever, but there are people who work construction. That's a dangerous job. Do they go to work every day thinking I'm going to fall off a building? No, they take precautions to not do it, but it's a dangerous job.
Totally.
We see these guys doing the electricity in Thailand, which is maybe a more dangerous job than in other places in the world.
Might be.
They get paid pretty well because it's dangerous, but
do they?
Yeah.
Oh.
For unskilled labor, it's pretty well paid. But I think that what it boils down to is what you are willing to risk. And so when I get that question, it's not about me. The person doesn't really care what my answer is. It's about the person asking it. And I actually recently, yesterday, got a question from a guy who's a beginner who's worried about head injury. And I said to him, I cannot advise you because this is a personal decision. If you're worried about it all the time, maybe not something that's worth the risk for you.
Or is meaningful. Like, it just doesn't balance out in terms of meaningfulness.
I don't know. You look at Danny Way, who's this incredible skateboarder.
Right.
He's afraid of heights.
Yeah.
And so he builds the biggest fucking tallest ramp in the world ever.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he's not afraid of heights. It doesn't mean he doesn't think about heights, but it means that the height is not what he's after.
Yeah.
So preventing head injury is not what I'm after in my life in general.
And then I just had a thought of it. 1 second. I've lost it, unfortunately.
Was it about the guy who asked me the question, being a beginner?
I don't know, I got lost on it.
Okay.
God, I wish I could get it. It has something to do with the meaningfulness of what you're attempting. Like, I don't know. Lately I've been having this, like, perspective zoom out, you know, where you zoom out of all of life, and you've been doing a lot of work in Vipassana, Buddhism.
We talked about that in our last episode, if you guys want to reference that.
Yeah. There's this weird thing where nobody believes it, but everybody knows it, that everybody is going to die. Like, everyone. And it's really like the quality of your life. And sometimes the quality of your life is defined by how long it lasts, like stretching out quite far. Sometimes it's defined by the experiences you have in a shorter time or the impacts you have on other people around you. And yes, repetitive brain injury could impact the quality of your life, especially if you live longer. Like, there could be diminishment of mental capacities. But if you're risking those for quality of life experience differences, maybe it balances out for you.
Yeah. There's a wonderful guy in the book that we're reading who is a very intense mountain climber, rock climber. And he's talking about the adventures he's had and the things that he's experienced when he gets into these flow states, and how it's this kind of like spiritual, otherworldly thing that teaches him so much about himself. And he had that great line that's, I don't climb to get on top of rocks.
Right.
And so this is also what you're talking about what you do something for, like what the meaning in what you're doing is.
Right.
You do not become a fighter to focus on minimal injury. You focus on minimal injury in order to have a long career. That's not why you fight.
Right. And part of the art is not being injured too. Although you're as a Muay Thai fighter, you take on more injury by design. Like,
By
the
design.
style is not evasive. It's basically standing in the hitting zone a lot.
Yeah. But you do damage as well because you're...
But in order to do
close.
damage, right? So I guess if you're taking Muay Thai in order to stay in shape, right? And you're also concerned with possibility of repetitive brain injury through sparring, you might want to choose something else to stay in shape. There's many ways to stay in shape.
Yeah, or don't spar.
Or don't spar, right? And I guess you basically have to say, how concerned are you about that? I'm just shocked at how little head issue there has been in all these hundreds of fights. Like, it's kind of unreal, especially as someone who stands in the hitting zone. Like you're not dancing away. In a way that, I mean, you have like 70 something KOs that you've given.
I think 78.
78 KOs, and you've been knocked to the ground one time.
Yeah, my KOs also are not to the head, other than my most recent one. Those are...
Yeah, but
there are other ways to KO than, like, head damage.
Oh, I see what you mean. Almost all knees knee KOs. But the point is like, or my point is, you stand in the hitting zone, and there's something about how you fight where you win that battle in the hitting zone, where against sizable opponents, most of them are much larger, right? Which would also, you would think, would increase the risk of damage.
Yep.
But somehow you've only been knocked to the ground one time.
Yep.
Out of, I don't know, coming on 1,000 rounds, and you've ended. You've been TKO'd by cuts, maybe, I don't know, 12 or 15 times.
Yeah.
But actually striking somebody and ending the fight, like having the ref step in, over 70 times.
Yeah, in my ledger. Yeah.
On your ledger.
Yeah.
So there's something about how you fight also, maybe about how you max protect at times, but there's something about how you fight that even though you're standing in the zone, you don't take that kind of blow. The blow that knocks you to the ground.
Yeah.
Which is kind of amazing. It's an unheralded part of your fighting, is this. Fighters that have never been knocked down are fighters that tend to be evasive.
You know that, like, when you come in with a black eye or something and people are like, oh my god, and you're like, you should see the other guy, kind of thing, is I get a lot of attention for the scars on my face because there are not a lot of women who walk around with scars on their face the way that I have them.
Totally.
Sao Singh, fucking baddest ass on the planet, also has
her.
them. She's proud of them.
Yeah.
But one of the things when people point out my scars, I point out how many times I've fought, is it's kind of that you should see the other guy, where I'm like, if you think this is a lot, you should see all the times I wasn't cut. Like, you should know all the times I haven't been damaged.
Yeah.
It's percentage.
It's kind of
thing.
amazing, honestly.
Like, I get on my motorbike every single day. I've had one motorbike accident. Ever.
Yes. Yeah.
I drive it every fucking day.
That's what when I lost my train of thought. I was reading on the safety of Muay Thai recently. I think something because Caitlin Young got a fractured orbital bone, which is, sorry, Caitlin, not a common injury, but serious. And it was the statistics for death for Muay Thai in Australia, and it was less than 2 per 100,000 either events or participants. Motorbike racing was like 7.6.
Motorbike racing?
It said motorbike,
oh,
so I don't think it's driving. It was sports. It was among sports.
Okay.
So motocross maybe.
Okay.
Was 7.6.
Pretty high.
So 4 times what it is for Muay Thai.
Yeah.
The rate of injury on Muay Thai is very high though, but actual morbidity was pretty low compared to other things which people think of as totally acceptable. Like if you're a motocross racer, you're not really thinking, aren't you afraid of dying? Right? But it's interesting. There's something about Muay Thai where you're like, aren't you afraid of this thing?
Yeah.
For some people it's a reasonable thing, but I guess that's our answer on that.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so we're on to the next segment. As we want to become well known for a variety of topic. Next segment.
And another thing.
The next segment is, are we doing a timer?
Yeah.
Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel.
Well,
we went to see it yesterday.
Yeah, we went to see it. It feels like it was a while ago. We went to the mall, Maya Mall, right? Had a burger, and then we went to see Captain Marvel. Okay, so this is not going to be a film review.
No.
This is...
No spoilers.
There might be spoilers. But right, there will be spoilers. Watch out for the cat. It's about the Captain Marvel character. Like, we went in there not knowing a lot about her, right? We know some superhero, like you're a big fan of the Hulk and Wolverine, right?
The best.
But portrayals of female superheroes is a really interesting topic because these are empowered women who can fucking kick ass, right? And it's worth talking about these kinds of representations, especially because when you walked out of that movie theater, you were like really happy with the character.
My expectations were really, really low for that movie. Kevin and I like to do this thing when we're walking into a movie, which is
That's true.
what 2 or 3 things we want out of it, and they're generally pretty simple.
Wait, what were your 2 things?
Well,
I
for
forgot.
example, if we're about to watch a comedy that's
Right.
probably not going to be very good, we're like, I want 1 real laugh and 2 chuckles. Like, that's what we want out of it.
Yeah, that's true.
So my desire going into it was actually kind of a negation.
Okay.
Is that when we went to see Black Panther, which is
Oh yeah, we didn't want to.
it's a meaningful movie in that it is representing non-white superheroes. So even though I did not like that movie,
Right.
it still has importance.
Right.
But what really left a bad flavor in our mouths after that movie was that it was weirdly racist, given that it's meant to be a very
Let's not
racially
go into,
charged movie.
We don't go into that because it's a complicated argument.
So what I was saying going into Captain Marvel was I want it to not be secretly sexist.
Not feel the way that other film felt.
Yeah, I wanted it to be pretty truly feminist, and I felt that it hit that mark beyond my expectations.
And didn't you have one other thing that you wanted from it?
I wanted at least 1 trackable fight scene.
Oh yeah, Sylvie hates many fight scenes.
I hate
and
car
all
chases.
chase scenes.
And I hate most modern fight scenes because you can't fucking track anything that's happening.
Yeah.
Whose leg is that? Aquaman, just generate all the animals. They'll fight each other. We'll pan out. It'll be fine.
It's very true. And what was my thing? I wanted her superpower, which is known as one of the great superpowers, to be meaningful.
And to be powerful. To be
It was going to be
impressive.
powerful, but yeah, I wanted to like a meaningful feeling behind it. Like Silver Surfer, you could feel the meanings of his
Less
superpower.
I just dented a submarine with my fist, but then got blasted across the thing by like a stick or whatever,
Yeah,
which happens.
That is true. Okay, so we're moving about. Why? I want to enter it this way. Why was that character meaningful to you? You came out of that. You're a female fighter. You are really invested in the envelope of being empowered in a sport, right? Why did you leave that movie theater charged with her? Like, what did you like about her representation?
I wasn't necessarily charged by her. I was
No?
happy with a lot of the things in the movie, like the
Maybe
thing
you were
itself.
thumbs up. You were thumbs upping it.
Yes, because there were lots of things. All right, there are a couple of ways to approach this. There were choices made in the movie that were meaningful to me in terms of like how they represented characters that weren't her.
Okay.
That to me felt like changes from the norm of how female
You're
superheroes
talking
are.
like a Sarah Lawrence
Because I'm
answer.
trying not to ruin anything.
Oh no, you have to talk about it. Like, we cannot give a theoretical treatment. What was it about her character that was awesome?
She was flawed in a way that male superhero characters are not necessarily. It didn't map necessarily. She fucking falls, like she biffs it, and does not have this like I land lively like a cat at all times. Like she fails over and over and over. I like that her struggle was not this like, oh, I'm at odds with my super heroine-ness. Rather, it was she didn't fucking know who she was. And so her movement towards power,
Right.
you like the word empowerment, I like the word power. Her movement towards power was, I'm going to be who I think I am, not who I'm being told to be.
Yes.
She has a mentor who she is trying to please, and that becomes a pivotal thing in the movie. I, as a woman, and many women in the world, have mentors we are trying to please.
Right.
And when you get the like, fuck you, I'm going to do it my way, which
Right.
is something that I'm currently trying to do in my Muay Thai,
We're going to talk about that.
that to me is very meaningful. And then these small things that I'm talking about, in these track onto representation, right?
Right.
So Black Panther, important because it's representation for non-white, specifically black kids. Fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Having a female superhero character
Right.
who's not coiffed and like always landing with her ass looking in perfect whatever, like she's badass. Men have a lot of these, right?
Right.
Not only do you have tons of actors like Schwarzenegger, Van Damme, Bruce Willis, all these people, but every character they've ever played is like a representation of like this badass man, right? I can name the female characters in short list who have had that impact.
Oh, Sarah Connor.
T2
That's
Sarah
it.
Connor,
That's
not
it.
T1 Sarah Connor.
Right.
Ripley. Like, it's a short list. So for me, one of the things that made me all like teary and emotional and happy about it.
And you did cry a little bit in that movie.
Cried, but not because of that. Cried a lot in that movie. Was just having a woman like her. And she's not like me necessarily, but there were elements that were like me. But that kind of woman represented in film as the main person, and the other women they had in there and their representation. So it wasn't just the one who has to be cool among all the guys, like true. Black Widow.
Yeah.
It's fucking cool.
Her friend and her, also the Annette Bening character, also had that quality. It's like, this is a way of being, which, I don't know, we can't go crazy in this way, but we would at least have to say this is somewhat in contrast to how you felt about Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
There were a couple of scenes in Wonder Woman that really, you fucking loved them.
Yeah.
But
I think
by and large, she did not hit the same taste buds.
No, I think there was a big difference between Wonder Woman's writers and Captain Marvel's writers. Captain Marvel's writers were mostly women. I think there was one male name in there, but there were like 4 or 5 women who helped write it.
But Wonder Woman had a female director, I think.
Okay, but director and writer is not the same thing.
That is
so Caitlin, who we were just talking about,
Caitlin Young,
her partner Ryan was saying that he liked the movie. It wasn't his favorite. Also not my favorite, but I was very moved by it. So I said, maybe if you'd grown up as a girl, you would have liked it more. Maybe if I were not white, I would have liked Black Panther more. I don't know.
Totally.
But he's like, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, I don't know if I can even fucking explain this because it's this representation thing. And I was thinking in my head how I would explain this, because there are all these tiny things that the way they were written made me really happy, because that's not the way they would be written in a normal superhero movie. And I think they're things that people who have grown up male do not even see. And the way I explain this is, when I was at Lana, there were 2 rings. There was a male-only ring, and then what we call the women's ring, but really is just anyone can go in it.
Yeah.
Women are allowed in it. It's not the women's only ring. Because men can go anywhere, many of them were not even aware that I was not allowed in the men's ring.
Yeah.
It never even occurred to them.
Sylvie happens to be over there.
Like, why don't you come in here?
Why don't you
It's not even this like, I just don't like that I'm not allowed in there. I suffered for it because that's where the clinching happened, and I was not allowed in it. Like, you are not allowed in here.
And it's a fundamental reason why we left Lana. Well, not for that policy, but you were not getting clinching and you're a clinch fighter. So we went where we could get clinching.
The point being, these things that seem like small have huge ramifications.
Yeah.
So things in that film that were written by women and choices they made about who gets that line, who gets to make fun of the scientist, like any of these things, rather than movies that are written by men, like that stupid first Thor one where Natalie Portman can't even say scientific lines without sounding like a complete idiot because they're not written for her.
Yeah.
Little things like this that maybe as someone growing up as a man just wouldn't even see, I saw. And I loved. And I was like, all of those things matter.
There was also, do we have time? What time is it? I just want to make sure we have time. Yeah, 16 minutes. That's good.
So another example, I don't know. Do you want me to give an example?
Yeah.
It's not from the movie. It's in life.
Go for it.
So Anne Quinlan is this woman who came to Thailand before fucking any Western women were coming to Thailand.
So long ago.
her experience of only women in the gym and my experience of only women in the gym, not even on the same planet. There are similarities because shit doesn't change, but they are not the same. And I acknowledge that. And I can only have what I have because of her. But...
And others like her.
Yes. So, she came to Lana one time when I was taking a private with Nung, who's a...
former boxing
champion. I was taking a boxing lesson from him, and he's holding pads for me. My experience of this is I'm doing pad work.
Yeah.
Like, that's what was happening. And Quinlan watched me. She was probably in her early 50s when this happened. So this was
40s,
like 30-something, 40 years after she had first come to Thailand. She was very young when she came.
She was 16 when she came.
16.
Fucking
Unreal. She's watching me do pads with Nung.
Normal pad work.
My experience, again, just doing pad work. She was on the verge of tears when I went to talk to her because she was like, nobody ever took me seriously like that. And I'm like, what? They didn't hold pads for you? And she's like, no, he's taking you seriously.
She can see it.
He's holding for you.
She can see it.
And I know what she means. Like, I've seen when there are these trainers who don't take someone seriously and it's like, just get the thing done.
But he wasn't like fight pad work or something. It was not
very
intense.
Normal.
It was normal hands boxing pad work.
But the fact that a woman can be getting very normal pad work was something she didn't experience. So this is another example I give of something that I couldn't see. I see it now because she told me, but I would not have seen that in that moment. And all of men don't see that I'm not allowed in the men's ring. Women who don't see the sexism that's happening in their gyms think it's not happening. Like, all of these things.
The thing is you're looking at that pad work, unless you have Ann Quinlan's her history, you can't even if you know intellectually that this is not something that could have happened 30 years ago, you can't even see it when you're looking at it.
Yeah.
It looks like this is just everyday stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess it's exactly to your point.
So a female superhero not having to use the fucking airlock as her one way of killing somebody, or not having only battles with other women. Like,
or the enemy is
will match
always
up with the other girl.
The arch female, which is just like, oh, there's two women in the gym, you should clinch together, right?
For example, I loved Supergirl when I was young. I had the Supergirl VHS until my dad taped over it with the Blue Angels thing. Fucking loved it. I'm sure if I watched it now, I would hate everything about it. But that Supergirl had to fight a witch because you only fight girls. Like,
That's
girls
right.
fight girls.
It's the other girl in the office.
Hate her.
There was also in this movie, I hope we have time, to me, one of the most beautiful moments, and it actually looked like it was taken out of your childhood, where she's like, I'm gonna get upset.
Yeah, you're crying already.
Where she's racing the go-kart, right? And she goes too fast, and she flips the go-kart out of the track, and then her dad's standing over her, and what does she say? It's not fair. Right? Do you remember that?
I remember the scene, I don't remember what she said.
She says it's not fair, the boys get to ride.
Oh, but it's like my childhood.
It is your childhood, Sylvie.
Funny, I missed that.
Did you miss that?
I did.
Oh my God.
Because what I paid attention to was her smile.
Okay, but she's like, this is something you have said and felt your whole life. You want to tell the Carlsbad story?
I don't really. Let's get into Sylvie's therapy session.
No, tell it very quickly. Very quickly.
Super short version. I'm the only girl and the youngest. And my brothers, when I was like 3 or 4 years old, were, young. My brothers were allowed to run ahead at Carlsbad Caverns.
Carlsbad Caverns is a big cavern, tourist attraction going into caverns, right?
And I wanted to be with my brothers because they're my whole world. They're who everything in my life revolved around. And I was not allowed to run ahead. I had to stay with my parents. And I thought it was so unfair that I sat down and cried and had a snit and would not move for a good, long time. I'm a Scorpio. I let these go for a long time. I never thought to myself it's because I was so little that I wasn't allowed to go, because my brothers definitely were not waiting for me.
Right.
But it remains a stronghold
But it was
of unfair.
It was a gendered unfair memory.
Because
right?
it has a pattern of double standards that I grew up with, and so it's like this strong thing. But that was also how her memory worked. These like strongholds of
totally
unfairness.
So I don't know. It's one of the more obvious things maybe, but this core feeling is probably a big part of your drive towards Muay Thai incredibleness.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carlsbad.
There's another similarity between me and Captain Marvel, which is when she's having her full on, let's see all her power, the way that the Hulk will go into Hulk mode or something. When she's having this moment, I leaned over to Kevin and I said, "This is what I look like after someone has fouled me, because when I get fouled, I go into a rage."
Which is what happened in your last fight. You got judo thrown.
It was
and I
very
was like,
foul.
it's there's only a minute left in the 5th round. You just made a mistake. Sylvie's gonna win this fight now.
Don't throw a stick at it. It's gonna kill you.
You get very upset when you're fouled.
I get very upset.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's stop this and go to the next segment. Okay, we're on to the next segment, which is actually connected up with the Captain Marvel segment. You've been listening to, I'm going to kind of be stepping away from this because I actually don't know a lot about this.
You're not going to mansplain this.
Well, let me explain this. I'm just going to say, Sylvie's been listening to a podcast, mental training coach.
She's a life coach.
Life coach. Cara Loewentheil.
The name of her program is Unfuck Your Brain.
Yes. She's a feminist-leaning...
No, feminist rock star.
Rock star. Oh. Hardcore leaning.
I lean towards not beating puppies.
Anyways, she's had a profound effect on Sylvie. Sylvie doesn't often talk about things as having a profound effect. I'm going to say she's had a profound effect on Sylvie. Some of the things she's been teaching have been fucking hand in glove with what Sylvie's been working on in Vipassana, and it started to filter into her training perspective, and it's fucking unreal. And I purposively have not listened to anything that any of her podcasts, because I wanted to just be your thing. But you've told me occasionally when you listen to one of them and you're like, God, I just heard this great thing. Everything she's teaching you is just about freeing your mind.
It's very Buddhist.
And also, one of the more important lines in terms of what we're talking about is the way she's moving you towards autonomy, which is what happened with Captain Marvel, and she discovered her autonomy. Mm-hmm. So maybe help people find out the podcast. Would men enjoy it? Specifically for women?
Men do listen to Unfuck Your Brain, and you can benefit a great deal from it because the skills are the same. But again, it's this thing of representation. She's speaking to women. She's using examples from women. She is a woman. It's about feminism. It's about having grown up in the patriarchy, and so a lot of your thoughts come from the patriarchy, and so you feel like you have two beliefs about something, but you don't. You have the thought that you've grown up or been taught to think, and then the thought you actually think. And so we, as women, often feel very at odds about this. Men have this experience too, but men suffer from the patriarchy in a different way than women do. So, not only for women, but if you have a hard time listening to a song where the he's or she's, not for you. But if you can switch it out and just use baby, you're fine, right?
Okay. So to keep it in the line of the Muay Thai story, what is it about what she's been telling you that has led you towards pursuing more autonomy in your training and your fighting? And one of the more interesting principles she teaches is this: I can't make you feel a certain way, and you can't make me feel a certain way. And how does that connect up with pleasing your trainer or trying to be good at Muay Thai? Or This is a very, to me,
It's
this
a
is just
very complicated
huge,
question.
but a very beautiful principle. Some very beautiful principles are moving through this.
Okay. I think that the arrow into what you're asking me, because it's a huge target
Okay.
that you're talking about, is
Well, do you want me to
no,
pose?
no. Something that I've discovered, both personally and in being online. So there's this enormous community that connects me to women all over the world, and so I get questions or, hey, I have that experience too, from a wide swatch.
Okay.
Is that how you do anything is how you do everything. So the struggle you have in sparring has nothing to do with being in the ring, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It is not isolated. It's the struggle you have on the bus, on the way home, in school, at work, talking to your mother-in-law. All of these things. I can't do this thing in this situation means you don't do that thing in any situation.
Wow.
So, what's so meaningful about Kara's lessons and skills in how to manage your brain is that they fix the whole sight picture. Like, you don't have to fix this in order to know how to fix that. It's the same thing. So, the ability to, in my life with you, understand heaven does not cause my feelings. You're making me feel this when blah, 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 blah. That's not true. My thoughts about what you're saying are making me feel this way.
Okay.
So I need to change my thoughts, not get Kevin to change what's happening. When you're in the ring, you can't be like, my opponent's making me feel this. You feel that because of what you're thinking about what the opponent is doing. So you change from here. You don't try to get other people to change.
Right.
And I think that there's this huge tendency to be like, if you just didn't do that, I wouldn't feel this. Okay. If your opponent just wouldn't try to head kick you, you might feel less worried about it, right? You can't get them to stop doing what they're doing unless you have a tactic for it.
Okay.
So I feel like they apply across the board so well that it can only have a profound effect on your life, because it's not how to have a better morning routine.
Well, one of the interesting things that you've shared is also the idea that you can't make people feel a certain way. Not only can they not make you feel a certain way, but you also can't make others feel a certain way.
And this is incredibly valuable for me and others like me, because a lot of us go into a fight being like, I want to make my trainer happy. I want to make my trainer proud.
Yeah.
I want to represent what they've taught me. You can't actually do that. Like, it's not like, oh, it doesn't matter that much. It's literally impossible for you to make your trainer feel either good or bad about how you performed. It's entirely up to them. There is no string between those two things.
And we did in one of our podcasts, we talked about crew syndrome, which is this vicious cycle that sometimes women get into, trying to please trainers that they have great respect for in Thailand. But this is about cutting that cord radically, that in training and in fights at any time, how to not try to please your trainer, basically.
Because you can't.
Because you
Not
can't.
because you're a better person if you don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Because you cannot. If I think that my mind can make the traffic light change, where do you solve that?
Get up in a traffic light.
It's not a technical fix.
Well,
not technique.
and so it seems, the impression I get is that she gives you daily skills, like skills you can use every day to discover this disconnect between yourself and others everywhere in your life.
To practice it, yeah.
Not just in the gym.
Yes.
Now, where has this led? It seems that this has led you, including with your Vipassana training and other things, this has led you to training more autonomy for yourself. A sense of autonomy. Am I following that right?
I don't.
Is that a weird
think-
way of saying
I
it?
don't think that it goes quite the way you're saying it.
Okay.
I made a windfall decision.
I like windfall.
No
High
high
five.
fives.
No high
It's
fives?
another windfall decision. No high
You've been
fives.
saying that for our whole marriage, I think.
Semi-consensual high five right there.
Yeah.
Is
Sylvie finds high fives cheesy. Just
I don't like high fives. So, okay, so in the same vein of being a people pleaser, like, oh, time.
Oh wait, we're gonna have to continue.
Oh. Okay.
Continuing on, people pleaser.
People pleaser. So if you are a people pleaser, what your aim is doesn't exist.
Because you can't make anybody feel any particular
It's like
thing.
being a unicorn wrangler. you don't do what you think you're doing. So, in Kevin's question about me training more autonomy, there came this breaking point. I had a number of very severe, short concession. What's the word?
I don't know.
Succession, short succession, serious breakdowns, and a lot of them stem from this like trying to please someone else, and so I kind of had this like enough moment where I kind of told Kevin off a little bit.
I don't even remember. Okay.
I just lost my thing, and
Here, take a moment to put that on.
so basically, I realized that a lot of the problems I was having were not actually caused by other people making me feel this. I was feeling this because of my thoughts about wanting to please disparate desires.
Oh.
So, people ask me, when one trainer shows you to do something, one technique, and another trainer shows you how to do the same thing with a different technique, how do you deal with that? And I'm always like, oh, it's not a big deal. You just use the one with the one trainer and the other with the other trainer, and it's not a big deal. That's fine if all you're doing is trying to please people. What really you need to do is decide which one you like, and that's the one you do. And so I realized that I was trying to do some things to make Kevin happy, and those things are different from the things that make Pinu happy,
Right.
and those are different from the things that make Karahat happy, and none of them actually make me happy other than thinking that I'm making you guys happy.
Totally.
And that's not actually happening. That's my unicorn wrangling.
Okay.
So I decided I'm going to do what makes me happy. And fuck all of you, even though I love all of you very much.
Totally.
That what makes me happy
Right.
doesn't get in the way of other people being happy, and
Right.
does not
Because that causal
rely
line
on things.
doesn't even exist.
Yeah. So I decided to, in my training, instead of trying to keep track of who I'm trying to make happy, simplify and only keep track of what makes me feel good. And so this led to, in my fight the other night,
Are we going into the technical version now?
we're going into Southpaw versus Orthodox because this was part of my autonomy.
Yeah, but I don't want to go too quickly rush over to that because then we can't get back to where we were. I want to say that what I find interesting about this move is that it dovetails with other aspects of autonomy that you've been trying to reach for. Like, for instance, we started getting you sparring at Rambas against opponents
closer to
that
my
were
size.
closer to your size because you admitted you hate sparring. Like, you've sparred so much against such large opponents that are quite skilled for so many years that it's been a profoundly negative experience, and you're always trying to please someone or the idea of
I'm
someone.
trying to do something that many, many, many women will identify with, even if they don't know that this is what they're doing. Is I was trying to be good.
Yeah, which is a fucking problem. It doesn't solve itself ever. But this was the idea. Was you were going to Rambas early before you would go to afternoon training. You'd go over there because he has some good boys that are about your size, skilled, but they're not going to fucking blast you 5-10 kilos over your weight. But the idea was to just experience the actions of sparring neutrally, right?
Yeah, without having a lot of hang-ups about trying to make my trainer happy with my performance in sparring or trying to be good in sparring. Or
It was like road miles, we were calling it. Like, just get the miles in so that the brain... But the idea was a little bit to become more autonomous, where your body is just moving through space, controlling itself, right? Would you agree with that? So this kind of move towards psychological autonomy is also comes along with the physical autonomy that you've started moving towards, which is you just want to feel flow.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Not do good or be good at Muay Thai.
Yes.
Right? So now let's talk about what you just were heading towards, your last fight, where you made 2 fights ago. You were fighting Nong Ben's, the 112 pound Northern champion, Southpaw fighter, good fighter who had beaten you twice.
And then 9 days later, I fought the 118 pound Northern champion, also Southpaw.
Right.
Pommy.
But in the Nong Ben's fight, you elected to fight her Southpaw.
I decided to fight her Orthodox.
Orthodox, I mean. So, and then when you fought this next fight, you also decided to fight Orthodox.
Yes, I am naturally Orthodox.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the meaningfulness of it. We want to include
for background, for people who don't know everything about me, I'm Orthodox. Right. About 2 years ago, Karahat started switching me to Southpaw in order to put my strong side to the front, to correct this overturning thing I was doing, to close off the open side. There are lots of advantages to training this way. It took me about a year of training this before I actually could fight a full fight all in Southpaw without getting like scared into Orthodox. And then I've fought probably a little under a year in Orthodox or in Southpaw, and in these last 2 fights I've decided to go back Orthodox for these fights.
Right.
That's the background.
So against Nong Ben's, very close fight, fighting Orthodox against the Southpaw. You knocked her out with your right hand, something that you've only done one time before in 200 plus fights.
Yeah.
So you had this incredible moment of instinct and natural power that showed itself. Now you were going against another Southpaw, even bigger, 18 pounds bigger than you. And we had, in the fight, we kind of had a disagreement about whether you should be Orthodox or Southpaw. What's really interesting about this is that in the terms of Sylvie moving towards more autonomy, the fact that I disagree with it means squat, right? In a way.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that disagreement and why.
I love Ron Artest. I love Ron Artest.
Right.
He shot the game-winning shot a while ago, many years ago.
Yeah.
And apparently Phil Jackson was screaming at him, don't shoot. And Artest went, whatever. Shot it, sank it, they win, right?
Totally.
That is my Kevin screaming, Southpaw, and I'm like, whatever. It's my Artest moment.
Totally. But that's not the end of the topic.
I didn't sink a game-winning shot, though. I just ignored him.
Well, you actually did. That's actually not even the truth.
I won a very, very close fight.
But that is not even the truth, because you started going Southpaw a little bit. But, okay, part of the podcast...
That was not to please you, though. That was because I thought it was a good
Exactly,
technique.
Yeah. But part of the podcast is we want to talk about technical issues.
Yeah.
Technical aspects of Muay Thai. So this is actually a really interesting nexus of a technique question and a psychological autonomy question. So to talk about the technical aspect of it, Sylvie is a Muay Thai fighter, which means she wants to close the distance on her opponent. Most of her opponents are larger, but they actually, Thais like to drift away and counter kick and score.
Use length.
To use their length. So one of the biggest challenges Sylvie has is getting into the hitting zone and closing that distance so she can finally grab him in the clinch. One of the interesting things is when you're facing a Southpaw fighter and you go Orthodox, is that your two lead legs are facing each other.
Right.
Right? And one of the challenges of this fight was the first couple rounds with her lead leg right in front of your lead leg, you're having a real hard time closing that distance because your lead, the lead part of your body is right up against her lead part of the body. There's no place to enter.
And she had a tactic for that position to keep me out with that raised leg teep she was doing.
She was raising her knee, she was sometimes teeping, sometimes pivoting off. These are typical ways of dealing with that. And also, to make things even more worse, is that when you're orthodox to a southpaw fighter, your open side, the high scoring side, is exposed to their power kick.
Right, which means that their open side is also your power kick, but whose weapon is that? It's not my weapon.
Yeah, you're not a kicker.
I'm not long.
Yeah. So, what's interesting is that the technical dimension of that, it could be that going southpaw to southpaw has certain advantages, just structural advantages.
Yeah.
Technical advantages. One of them is that you would close your open side to that kick. That kick would now be landing on your closed side.
Which she was firing a lot.
Yeah, she was scoring with that. What's really interesting is that you were very committed for other reasons, non-technical reasons, to fighting and remaining an orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
And what I kind of want to talk about is that as a fighter, you have to balance these things.
Yes.
You get advice from people all the time. You should kick, you do hook, low kick, whatever. You get technical advice that could all be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
But as the fighter, you have to drive the car.
Yes.
Can you talk about a little bit about that balancing act? Because you balanced it in that fight. You actually started going a little southpaw and then back into orthodox to mix things up. I don't know what.
Strategically, walking in southpaw to close off that open side, and then once I got in, going to orthodox because
that's how you wanted to be.
That's where I flow better.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I decided to go orthodox, both in the last fight and in this fight, is because sometimes, not all the time, I'm actually very comfortable in southpaw now. When someone says get in your stance, if I pose for a picture, if I'm like starting to shadow box or hit the bag or any of these things, I automatically go into southpaw. Like it's the way you pick something up with your dominant hand automatically.
Right.
So I am very comfortable. However, there's a difference between the heart rate comfort level you have in training and the heart rate comfort level you have in fighting, regardless of having 230 fights or not.
Totally.
It does not become like a walk in the park. Sanchai, I'm sure, has tension at times. There's this thing that happens to me sometimes when I'm in southpaw, which is everything becomes really verbal in my head. I'm like, find a way to do this, like kick, rather than just the kick just goes. I'm thinking kick, or I'm thinking close this, or I'm thinking all of these things that makes me very still, and I don't like that feeling. It's unpleasant. I also stay too far away and get stuck on the porch and don't kick and all of these things in orthodox, but I don't think them the same way that I think them.
Mental feeling.
Yeah.
Right.
But so I kind of, as we're speaking about Sylvie having fucking breakdowns, I had a really, really bad one in maybe December.
Okay.
Yeah. Where I was like, I want to quit.
Oh,
like, I don't want to fight Muay Thai anymore.
Yeah.
And the reason I was thinking that is because the joy was so gone that I was just like, I don't want anything anymore. Like, the joy is just fucking gone. That is a horrible, horrible thing to feel for anybody, but especially about the thing that you clearly love so much. The horrible, horrible reality about love is that you can only be hurt by things that you love. And so to love something really intensely means it can hurt you really intensely. So I was remembering to body experiences of fighting where I was like flowing And that doesn't mean I was good. It means it felt good. Like, I love doing this.
Yeah.
Like, when you see a little kid who's kicking the bag, he's so happy to be kicking the bag because it just feels good. Right? Pinu fucking has serious knee problems, back problems, like all this stuff. He cannot help himself but kick that bag.
Yeah.
And he's like remembering this joy of kicking the bag and feeling this joy of kicking the bag. So I wanted that possibility in these fights. So it was this contrast of technically good idea to fight southpaw.
Yeah.
But emotionally, mentally wanted the pathway to feel freedom and fluidity that is possible in southpaw for me, but felt like I wanted to be an orthodox.
But at that time, you told me I wasn't feeling southpaw, like for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So you were like, I don't want to feel whatever I was about to feel when I'm like, southpaw? You're like, no, not that.
You're like, this river has tons of rocks, a kayak makes sense, and I'm like, I want a raft and a paddle.
Totally.
Give me the raft and the paddle.
This is the very cool thing about that fight, and it's going to be up on YouTube probably in a day or two. Go watch it. It's this beautiful thing that a fighter has to do every time, I think, is that find that line, to surf that line between comfort and flow and technical reaching.
Yeah.
For things that are what you should do or what's smart to do or the expectation of technique that you cannot betray your own sense of flow and autonomy and fight well.
Yeah.
And it's very beautiful to me that you're finding that line. Thank you to Karen Loewentheil. Cara, that K lady. And it's funny because when you were describing that joy, a little bit of joy, that was something that you liked about Captain Marvel, that she smiled as a character when she thought of the thing that she
I don't want to describe this scene, but there was a scene, maybe a third through, that I fucking broke into tears because of her joy at something. The joy she felt.
Yeah. But you have to know it to have seen it.
Totally.
Right? It's very cool. So this is kind of like a technique part, but it's also about the journey of autonomy as a fighter, and you can't be a beautiful fighter without expressing yourself, right? So that's where you really want to get to at some point, is just an expression of you.
Yeah. And when it comes down to like, what's the right technique, which one feels good? Which one do you like?
Well, who was it that told you that? There was
Sakman Kong.
Sakman Kong?
Mm-hmm.
He was like,
practice the ones you like, because those are the ones you'll do.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's kill that. Okay. So we had a little bit of a technical mishap. The battery ran out while we were having a great back and forth on an important topic. So we might be restating something that was already recorded. We can't go back and look at what it was, the playback. So we might be it was an important thing. So bear with us. You can jump ahead if you heard this in the last little bit. But we were talking about Sylvie's decision to pretty much remain an Orthodox, even though there are maybe good reasons, technical reasons, why moving to Southpaw against her opponent, especially in the middle of that fight, there might have been a good reason to do so, but how, as a fighter, you have to balance what you should do or what people are telling you to do, and also finding your own sense of flow. Is that fair to characterize that a little bit?
Yeah, so I don't know if this was in the part before or not, but the feelings that I felt I would be having in Southpaw versus Orthodox were what were dictating to me the decision over which stance I was going to be in. I had a very severe good breakdown in December very emotionally hard. And I just did not have joy in what I was experiencing in the ring. Like, I hated fighting.
Well, let's put it in context. You had gone through a very arduous Muay Thai summit, trying to be an extrovert and leading people through their training when you're pretty much solid introvert, even though we do this stuff on camera. And you were being really feeling like you were being stretched to the limit of what you were. And then you just had a terrible personal experience in the ring where you had like lost joy.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? Like,
yeah. So the context Kevin just gave is that I had a hard December, and this was probably leading into January is when this fight happened, that I was like, I don't want to fight anymore.
And I don't know if we captured this in the last segment before the battery ran out, but you said this beautiful thing about only the things you love can hurt you.
Yeah, so if you love something a lot, it hurts you a lot. So it's a very intense, severe, horrible thing for anyone to feel that they want to quit something or stop something or no longer have joy in something that they've dedicated their whole fucking life to. Not the span of my life, but everything about my life right now. And Kevin's life too. So it's an incredibly selfish feeling because this is Kevin's life too. So if I were like, I want to quit, that's pulling him with me. Anyway, that feeling of not having joy in what I was doing anymore put a lot of emphasis on...
Oh, wait a second. Let's just go over this rough road here. I don't even know. This might be lasting for a while. Okay, let's go ahead.
So putting emphasis on fighting in a way that was going to allow me joy in the fight was first and foremost. It may make zero sense technically or even strategically to go down a certain part of the river that's very narrow in a raft. It's clearly made for a canoe, but you're like, I want to paddle it. It may be stupid for all the technical reasons, but that's what feels good.
Right.
You want to feel the raft. So basically, there were technical reasons that made a lot of sense to be southpaw in that fight.
The last fight, yeah.
But I made a feeling reason for why I went the way I went.
What I kind of talked about in the last segment, maybe recorded or not, is that this negotiation that a fighter has to make between what they should do or what is right or what their coach is telling them to do and what they feel, what they feel they want to do, you have to like surf that line. You have to find that place where you don't lose your autonomy, your sense of self-direction, because ultimately as a fighter, you have to drive the boat.
Yeah, it's also a self-trust. That is what flow is. When Laird Hamilton was in that fucking monster wave and he decided to put his right hand into it,
yes,
which nobody does.
Yeah.
Technically, people might be like, you don't do that. That's stupid. But it saved his life.
Well,
like, that's what made it possible. So it's trusting your feeling rather than like, this is so weird for me to be saying because I talk about how you don't listen to your body. Like, just be hard all the time.
Yeah.
Is that there is a degree to which you're like, let it flow. Like, don't interfere with the flow kind of thing.
And I'd say in the larger sense also of reaching that breaking point is that breaking point is a beautiful thing. Because what that breaking point is saying that you have built a tower out of certain materials, right? And it can only get so high.
Yeah.
Like when you realize, when you see something break, it means whatever worked to that point is only good to that point. And that you have to move to another base, another way of doing things if you want to get past that point. Yeah. If you just want to stay where that is, go ahead, build the tower out of wood again, over and over. But I think that was a really instructive hard point was to be like, we can't build this on sand and have to build it on rock.
Yeah.
And really what you want to get to in your Yod Muay ambition is you want to have the freedom of expression that you see Yod Muay have.
Yeah, because when you're watching, people ask me why Carhat's my favorite fighter, which I find ridiculous, because just look at him and you'll know why he's my favorite fighter. But you're watching him in flow. You are watching someone's flow. When you go to a live concert, rather than listening to someone on CD, their recorded album, you're watching them in flow. When you see Freddie Mercury in flow, fuck, like,
Right.
How do you not be moved to some emotional state by that?
Totally. And I will say this, since you've started moving towards autonomy and flow, I saw it with you working with Pinu, and you do sometimes kind of do like a free sparring thing with him. It's really impossible to describe because it's really not sparring. I can't even describe it. It's this weird kind of like
Playing.
Yeah, this Velociraptor versus Ninja game. But I see you creatively interacting with the pocket space in a way I've never seen any fighter ever interact that way, like man or woman. I don't know if it's ever going to get expressed all the way into the ring, but I see you doing stuff in the pocket space that nobody has done. And it's part of this like weird Frankenstein quality that you have of all the influences of fucking Diesel Noi and Karahat and fucking legends, like just 1 hour with this legend, whatever. Just so much input, and then starting to turn everything over to yourself. Like let's see what comes out spontaneously. And also this thing that you've discovered about not wanting to be good or please people, please your coach, please people that have expectations or hopes for you. It's like I see something happening, and in that fight against Balmy, you were walking that line so beautifully. Like, it was a very close fight. You were staying in your orthodox, but you also walked into southpaw 2 or 3 times in the 4th round or 5th round, and come on now, there's a dog running around like crazy. Puppy. You started getting into your position where you weren't even in a stance. It was very cool to me, just as an observer. Like, I'm excited to see where things can go with all of your influences and instincts. And joy. So speaking of which, segueing on to the next segment, this is just crazy. I mean, you live a crazy life, Sylvie.
Do I?
The Diesel Noi has been in the gym.
My gym.
Your gym has taken an interest, of course, a pretty serious interest in trying to like mold your fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not just like imprinting Diesel Noi knees on you. Like, some fighters are like, you have to fight like how I fight because that's all I know. What's cool about your evolution is Karahat's a female fighter. He's like, let's turn you into a Muay Thai demon. Let me teach you some weight transfer shit that works for me as a female fighter. Use it as a Muay Thai fighter.
Yeah.
Diesel Noi is like, you're a Muay Thai fighter, but you know what? Refs are breaking the clinch on you. Try these nasty low kicks. I don't know if he ever fought with them. He might have just improvised that. But he's taken a real interest in these large opponents that he doesn't actually even want you to fight because they're so big, right? So maybe talk about a little bit of what it's been like to have possibly the greatest fighter ever just love you through your fighting.
It's cool that he's been at the gym, because the times that I've been able to train with him, it's literally like an hour and a half. So it's just this like shot, and then you gotta go. So any advice he's giving you is like assumed to be kind of out of context. Like, it's just.
Yeah, he
bizarre.
never had seen you train for real, like how you train every day.
Right.
Yeah.
So actually, we had thought, we're like, how crazy would that be to like do Diesel Noy's program, to like train with Diesel Noy, because he's so intense.
Yeah.
And now that we've seen it, it's just incredible. Like his mind is so keyed into things and keen and like trying to like, he doesn't try to shape you in the sense of like mold you into something. He's totally just like brushing off dust. Like he hasn't, for how intense he is, he has a very delicate touch for changes. He does not make you make big changes.
Yeah, that's true. Actually.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think Gary put it really well. He's like, he's so mean, but really positive. It's weird. He's been punishing the boys at the gym. But, so he and Pinu get along really well. Like, it's been really great for Pinu to have him at the gym too. And so I think that this, like, Pinu has had to deal with me going out and seeing these other trainers and bringing it home with me in this very like disjointed way.
Yeah.
Whereas they're like collaborating on me for this past month,
right,
in a very interesting way. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of some of the things I've noted about the experience.
Well, there's a few things going on. One is serious ties connected to you are always like, why are you fighting such big fighters? Like, it's a sign of not having social power to agree to matchups where you have serious disadvantages.
Yep.
When you become a big name in Muay Thai, you get to dictate who you fight to.
Well,
so,
it's like when you become heavyweight champ, you pick who your next guy in line is. Or
that
whatever.
kind of thing. And so when Sylvie, because Sylvie's not really interested in becoming the champ who gets to like say, I don't want to fight, blah, 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 whatever.
I'm not fighting to retire.
Yeah, and a lot of Thais are really fighting to retire. They want the big name, and they want to fight less and less and get bigger paychecks. And what Sylvie's after is like Yod Moy ambition, to fight in a way that has never been possible for women through the process of just hundreds of fights, just iteration after iteration. So in order to do that, you need to take on bigger and bigger girls, because you have to give up disadvantages to have willing opponents. And for someone like Diesel Noy, it makes no sense, or Pinu, it makes no sense to be doing this.
That's not their world. Yeah.
It's not their world. It's not really anyone's world. It's Sylvie's world. What's kind of cool...
Planet Sylvie.
Planet Sylvie. Like Planet Home. What's kind of cool is that Diesel Noy also expressed this thing, this reasonable perspective, but then he somehow has been won over to you fighting this last fight against a giant girl. You sent a video of the last tape to him, and he was like,
she is big.
She is big.
And I think she might be bigger this time. It's possible. I'm smaller, for sure.
Yeah. And so, Diesel Noy had a kind of change of heart, right?
Which he's done before. We talked about that in the last episode with Angie.
Oh, that's true. But so what was it like for you? I mean, you won this fight, you messaged Diesel Noy, you sent him the video, and then he called you.
Yes.
Right? He also wrote you like a voluminous text message, right? And this is like at 10 or 11 at night, right?
there's layers to this. So before I left, he was like, he found out that I was fighting. I had not told him. And he found out I was fighting, and he's like, send me the video of your last fight. So I sent it. He's like, oh my God, she's huge. And then he's like, tomorrow we'll make a game plan. But I was leaving already. We were driving up to Chiang Mai already, so there's no time to meet him to like devise a plan. So instead he writes it out. Like long, thoughtful, strategic, like, when you turn, you go all the way in, you don't stop far away, blah, 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 this whole thing, like, make sure you get her tired first, this whole thing, some of it familiar to what he's been telling me, and some of it, like, clearly he devised in his head watching this fight and thinking about seeing me train yesterday, right?
Totally.
Amazing. So he gives me all of this instruction that I read, I pay attention to, I'm like, this is going in the bank for if I can use it, all this stuff. When I get out of fights, I immediately text Crew New, sometimes Karahat, this time Crew New and Diesel Noy, just letting them know that I won, and that I'm okay, whatever the thing is. So, I'm texting back and forth with Krunu because he had a misunderstanding about her being Northern Champion. And as we're getting in the car to drive back, and I've sent the fight to Diesel Noise so he can see it, because he's like, make sure you send me this thing. As we're driving home, the phone rings. It's Diesel Noise, and he's like, did you win? I'm like, yes. And he was like, are you hurt? Like, I think I was actually answering his question, are you hurt, in text as he called me. And so we have this conversation, and there's nothing super special about the conversation. He's basically like, how did it go? How do you feel? All of this stuff. But every time I answer one of his questions about like how it went, that I'm not really hurt, it's no big deal, like it's kind of the normal thing, he was giggling and squealing a little bit, like so excited by this whole thing. So excited.
He has a wonderful little laugh.
He gets so excited by things, and he was overjoyed by this whole thing, and he's like, okay, we'll talk later, I'll see you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm telling him when I'll be back at the gym. Fast forward 40 minutes to when we get home, and I've showered, and I'm sitting on the bed, and he's texting me walls of text again about he's clearly watched the fight maybe 2 or 3 more times, and he's not telling me at all what I should have done or anything like this. He's like, I liked that referee. He said something to me about her being in debt to the judges that I don't understand. Like, I'm gonna have to ask if he knew, but he was still thinking about it, and he's like, you need to fight this person again, which is incredible, because he was like, she's too big before, and now he's like, this is worthy of a rematch, like this is exciting.
But it's crazy because often the instinct is you beat somebody in a close fight and you're like, well, I'm done with that one.
Yeah.
And instead he's like, no, you could beat her more definitively.
That one was close.
That was a close fight.
Make it a little
He's
wider.
like, I think we could open up the lead. I don't even know if I've ever really heard a Thai respond to a victory that way before.
To want a rematch off of a win? I don't think so.
I've never heard that before. That's very interesting. So he's a hero of yours.
Oh, I love him so much.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing you have him and Karat, and they're fucking hot and cold. They're so different as people, and they're both heroes of yours. How do you take in, we just talked about the whole like, don't try to please people. You can't please people. How do you take in this like influence of wonderful historic fighters and the privilege of even knowing them, let alone them caring about you, and then also balancing that with, I can't please people?
I'm not entirely sure how that question goes. I think that my error in relationships that I have is thinking that they are fuck all dependent on whether someone is happy with your performance or not. Like, there are relationships in your life, sometimes very tensioned ones, where you're like, I know my mom loves me. Like, I can fuck up pretty bad and my mom will love me, right? Like, I'm not super concerned with, like, pleasing my mom. It'd be nice if, like, I could let her know that I appreciate her more, I think. But in terms of, like, being proud of me or something, it's not something I concern myself a lot with. But I think that's kind of more of a male figures in my life thing that I have. But I think that realizing that fundamental truth, that, like, you are not conning anybody. I actually didn't do anything at all to make Karat, Dieselnoy, or Krunu like me. Nothing.
It wasn't even a aim.
So how could I possibly do anything to make them dislike me? I didn't do anything. Yeah. So there's no, like, not living up to.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah, Karat wasn't like, oh, I like this fighter, she keeps winning.
I lost every single fight.
Every single fight, like, he was in the corner for, like, 8 fights or something. It was like, with announcers saying, guess who's in Sylvie's corner?
Someone you don't see often at all has come out of his cave. Jesus.
But you're right. I mean, the magnetism that is there wasn't something you earned, so you couldn't discern it.
Well, this is the thing, is we often will take one side of something and reject the other, which makes no sense. You can't have half a thing. I remember being very upset driving back from Valhalla, that prison that I taught creative writing at.
This is many years
in college.
ago. In college, yes.
It's one of my favorite things I ever did, was teaching creative writing at this prison. And I was really upset because that day's session had gone shit bad. Like, really, really bad. Not just in terms of like people being checked out and like kind of struggling to get things to work, but a couple of our guys had been punished by the COs for stuff that should be kept in our room and wasn't. Like, it was a betrayal of things. So it was like this big thing that I felt very guilty for, and all of these things going back. And I realized on that ride home that I don't take credit for when it goes well. So how can I possibly take the guilt when it doesn't? Like, it's out of my hands. And it's so shit for me to think that when I go in there for 2 hours a day, that anything that's happening in there is due to me. They have so much shit going on that they do not check at the door.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with me, that's going to influence how all of that goes.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's that same thing of like, I don't need to take credit for Diesel Noi or Karahat or Pinu being happy. One, because I can't. But two, because it's not something that I feel.
Yeah.
So I also don't need to take blame when they're not happy. Like, Pinu's pretty mercurial. He has shit days and it's got nothing to do with me.
Totally.
It's like, it's my fantasy if I decide to like take credit for it.
Totally.
In either direction.
I don't know. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm looking forward to more of it. Diesel Noi is ending his month with us, and then he's going to Brazil.
I'm gonna miss him, and I think Pinu's gonna miss him a lot too.
Yeah. But we're working on trying to bring him back again. So if you're watching the podcast and you're thinking of coming to Thailand, maybe there'll be a chance.
Sequel.
A sequel.
There's like 80 Rockies movies. We'll have like a bunch of Diesel Noi residencies.
Okay, so let's stop this and maybe go to the last segment.
Okay.
So back to probably the final segment. We wanted to talk a little bit about the most recent patron session that we put up, which was we filmed with Boon Lai,
Sortanakun.
who was very difficult to track down. We looked for him for over a year. He is a Golden Age legend. We filmed with him at a military base above Bangkok, where he now trains soldiers and the kids, right?
Yeah, soldiers' families, yeah.
And he was one of the the Golden Age had so many wonderful fighters. Boon Lai almost like typifies, he was a couple-time Lumpini champion. He kind of typifies the like baseline of greatness of the Golden Age. Like, he isn't like the greatest to ever walk, like some art seems like. But he fought everybody.
Everyone.
He won belts off
against the fucking
Long Swan.
hardest dudes.
Who was the other one? Long Swan and
I want to say Wang Chinoy,
maybe.
but I might be wrong about that.
Yeah, but fucking huge opponents. His greatest victory was against Nam Kaboon, who nobody could beat.
Yeah.
Right? But anyways, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Muay Thai Library session, this particular one, because in it we really concentrated on the head kick. His head kick is just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe take us down a little bit about that, capturing that with him. What it means to you.
Something that Kevin and I
Turn right onto the ramp.
something that Kevin and I have started trying to include in the documentation process of the Muay Thai Library is slow motion capture. So we got slow motion of a knee that Nam Kaboon does, that he calls a slide knee. We got slow motion of Manop doing his teep, and we've done slow motion of Boon Lai doing this head kick. And to me, when you when you see these guys move, there's just this like, what is that? Like, it's so incredible. And even when you slow it down, you're still like, what is that? There's a tendency nowadays, and it's very popular, there's nothing wrong with it, but this is what people are way into, is the breakdown. So people are like breaking down, the foot goes this way, and then it angles here, and then there's a timing to look at the opponent's thing, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I get it.
All that's happening, yeah.
Oh, Yo Kumpan's elbows, I forgot. We slowed those down.
One of the first ones we did. Yeah.
This is not a breakdown. Like, you can actually watch it happening in slow motion and look at every single part of it for 10 minutes or however long the thing is.
Yeah.
And it retains this element of mystery of how is he doing that? Not because it's not broken down. Even in those breakdowns, you don't know how he's doing it. You just think you do because it's been explained. It's like if someone explains a movie to you and you're like, oh, I understand Heidegger now. And you're like, you kind of don't. So, one, that was it. And he has such a beautiful, quintessential, like, perfectly illustrative of the golden kick is his. The way it just comes out of nothing and then drops in. I don't...
Maybe a small, like, side thing here. In what you were describing, it reminded me of the experience you had many years ago, before we came to Thailand, I think, at least before we moved here, when you met Dewey, is that his name?
Yes.
So, say a little bit about who Dewey is and that frog in water thing, because that's connected to this.
So I was at a Newburgh Boxing Academy, like, totally the kind of thing you would see in a movie.
Yeah, like $1 million baby
Bronx,
gym.
When you go in and there's just like these like rough people in there. And
you were training boxing. It was like an hour drive from our.
Well, it's actually close to where I worked, so
yeah, that's
it was
true.
Convenient.
Yeah.
I was the only woman. They did not have any fucking idea what to do with me being in that space. But there was this man, Dewey, who I think was in his 40s, from the area, and he had been wrongfully imprisoned for
Murder,
18 or 20 years, double murder. And they exonerated him through DNA evidence, just let him out. He had been at Sing Sing, which is a fucking horrible place.
You can find his story. It became a notable.
He got an ESPN
story.
Award shortly after I met him. But he is so sweet.
But when you met him, you didn't even know who he was.
Not at all. He's just a very nice guy at the gym.
Yeah, yeah.
But when he would move around, he would get in the ring and just shadow box. And he was mostly unremarkable just walking around. He kept to himself. He was sweet, but like just kind of older, like looked like a very normal 40-year-old dude. He's a little bit aloof, even though he's very kind. He had a daughter named Diamond who he would bring in. She was the only other girl, and he'd let her like swat at the bag a little bit, but she was not really into it. But when he would get in the ring and start shadowboxing around, I use this example of like a frog on land is kind of awkward. You're kind of like, nobody believes in intelligent design when you're looking at a frog on land because it's so awkward. But when it dives into the water, you get this like, that's what that's for. Like, that makes sense. Dewey's element was not walking around. Dewey's element was in that ring. And when he would dive into his element,
he was a professional boxer before he went to prison, I believe.
I don't know if that's true.
Oh, maybe then in prison he was a boxer. He's not somebody who just hits a bag.
In prison,
yeah.
In order to fucking like get a focus and his mind right, he would just spend every single second he could in the boxing ring. And so he was the first person to ever say to me, he's like, when I get in this ring, I know exactly how many steps it is in any direction to hit the rope. Like, this man had memorized every millimeter of space around him, and you could see it in the way he was moving. So that's Dewey, and the like form.
And this is the thing. That frog in water is what I think of when we film the slow motion of these guys.
Yeah.
Like, holy fuck.
Like, look at that kick. Like, the kick of the leg that makes you go like, burn up on land.
A frog kick.
What was crazy is when we asked Boon Lai to do like kind of freestyle shadow boxing, he was like, oh, like he clearly hadn't done it in a long time. Like he was not in shape.
Yeah.
These guys often are not in great shape.
Yeah.
But then the like arc and stretch and flexibility and pace, I was amazed.
Talk about phrasing. Yeah.
Phrasing is a term used in music that means you have the sheet music that tells you exactly how long each note is, but phrasing is the actual person playing the instrument's decision to kind of drag out, slow down, or speed up. To like, it's like the difference between me singing Silent Night and Christina Aguilera singing Silent Night. It's not going to sound the same because there's like phrasing.
It's like the emotional texture.
Yeah.
Sinatra's singing was known for its phrasing.
Yes.
Where you pull notes and everything. There is.
He has phrasing in his movements. So he was showing me this like parry down elbow thing, and he had this phrasing on the elbow where it slowed down for a second and then like pulled out at the end.
Yes.
It's like some fucking Quicksilver thing or something.
And you feel this phrasing all the time when you're training with Karhat.
Yes.
As another person who's got incredible phrasing. But this is the thing is, like, if you're, as a fighter, if you do not have that autonomy that you're moving towards, you can have no phrasing. Like,
yeah, you're just reciting.
You're
things.
and a lot of combination fighting, which is typical of the West, is that kind of recitation of memorized movements, which is like playing the music exactly. Whereas this Boon Lai session, it's full. Like, I don't know what people actually got out of it. A lot of people were extremely excited to actually see him. There's only a handful of his fights that got preserved on YouTube. To actually see him for an hour, have the camera on him, many people were very excited. I don't know if I have a feeling like in a session like that, you could look at it 100 times because of that phrasing, that emotional texture that's put into the tempo of the strikes. And that's why he had such a horrible head kick for his opponents, as that phrasing made it so that you couldn't see it.
Yeah.
You couldn't read it, and it was on you and over your shoulder before you even knew what was happening.
I knew he was throwing it because he was showing it to me, and I didn't know when it was gonna come.
And there is just like in the slow motion stuff, the slow motion of your facial reaction to holding those pads for that head kick was so incredible.
He was not throwing with power, and fuck. That was not. I was not like, oh, I'm not good at holding pads, I'm getting knocked over, I'm small. That was not what that was. That's not what that was.
What was it?
That was the get the fuck out the way. Because if you put even a little more intention on that.
No, on your face is so much joy. There was no fear. It was just like, oh my God.
Because it was so hard.
But you were smiling.
Yeah.
You were so happy. Anyways, so check out, if you're not a patron, I think you can become a patron for $1 and still see it. You see the last 5 sessions we put up, and it's definitely one of those, unless you're watching this many months from now.
Yes, you've got 2 months about at $1, right?
Yeah.
Because we put up 2 a month.
Yeah, so we put about 2 a month. Put up 2 a month. But definitely check out that. I think we put the slow motion on YouTube even.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so you can find it on YouTube, even without being a patron. So that's pretty good. That was episode 3. I think we covered Captain Marvel, child fighting. This is the thing. Muay Thai is life. It touches everything.
What else?
Politics, culture, the meaning of life, autonomy, of the individual. There is nothing it does not touch. Like, it is really striking that an art and an actual sport can reach so deeply into the most important things of life. I don't know that there's many. What is unique about Muay Thai, because it's not only a fighting art like karate or something, but it's also a living sport.
But it's strongly an identity too. That's why your example of people who live in a shipping town or like a shipping community, you don't sometimes get on a boat. Like, it's your entire identity. It's everything you do. It's the entire way you understand the world.
Yeah, there's a phrase the philosopher Wittgenstein uses a lot, which is a form of life. Because Muay Thai is a form of life. It's not just a martial art, but it pulls with it a root of living that makes its ramifications extend to every part. I don't know, it's kind of crazy because we're very devoted to it, so maybe we overstate the meaningfulness of it. But I think the podcast itself is demonstrating how far Muay Thai reaches into the things that matter in the world. So I'm kind of excited about this. This is episode 3. Everyone who's a patron helps bring this kind of content forward. The camera we buy, the microphones, everything we do.
The trip to fight that allows us to have our second couch.
Totally, it's our second couch. Like, thank you everyone who's doing that. And if you're not a patron and you're enjoying it, it's easy to become a supporter. The link's down below, you'll see it. But I'm kind of excited about what Muay Thai Bones can become. This is only episode 3. It feels like every episode when I make the list out of what we might cover, it feels like, wow, we're going to run out of things to talk about, but I have a feeling
we never get to everything on our list, ever.
Yeah, and I don't think we're ever going to run out of things to talk about. So, signing off.
Sylvie out.
Sylvie out.